Hello and welcome to another Sonic Lab. Today we're looking at the IK Multimedia Uno Synth. This is the little fella here. It's a compact desktop analog mono synth with two oscillators, a multi-mode filter, two envelopes, a sequencer, some effects and a bunch of other stuff besides. Now this is a kind of new area for IK Multimedia because previously they do sort of audio interfaces, they do iOS stuff, they do sample tank, they do all these kind of like software things as well as some MIDI control hardware as well, but this is an analog synthesizer and it's a new thing for them. It's done in conjunction with Eric Norlander, who you may know. He's not only has he got a 1967 full Moog system, which we're all very envious of, but he's also been involved in designing synth for quite some time. He started, probably the first one you would know about is Elisa's Andromeda Fusion as well, Elisa's Fusion, and a number of other things besides. So this is what he's kind of brought to the party. So looking at the unit, it is a small kind of low cost desktop type synth. We can put batteries in, takes 3 AA, so you can power it and sort of carry it around in your pocket and use it on headphones if you like. We've got this idea is this sort of parameter access thing, and these are sort of like old school parameter access, except these aren't those sort of vinyl buttons that wear out. They're actually just sort of touch things. Oh, there we go, there's some sound. Parameter access, we've got a sequencer, we've got an arpeggiator, we've got an inbuilt delay, dedicated cutoff knob, dedicated tempo knob, dedicated volume knob. The rest of these are all assignable. And as you can see, things like the oscillator waves, we've got two oscillators. These are analog oscillators as well, variable waves shapes with fine tune, and the filter, multi-mode filter with resonance, envelopes, attack and decay on the filter and attack and release on the filter, and LFO, rate, pitch and fill. There are a lot of other parameters that you can get to, so you've got access to, say for instance, the full ADSR envelopes if that's what you want, but they are only accessible either via MIDI CC or via the IK Uno Synth editor, which is actually out now, and you can try that. It runs on Mac and PC, I believe, and it connects via the USB connection, because the USB has a micro USB connection which will supply power. I'm not running it on batteries, and you get MIDI over it as well. Mono 1/8 inch jacks, output and input. We've also got these, the MIDI comes on these little, as we know, we're used to these sort of tails with MIDI DINs, but there's a difference with these guys. They've not gone for the standard 3.5mm, they've gone for, I think it's 2.5mm, which is sort of micro jacks. They're sort of unusual. So just what we need, another standard, even after the MMA MIDI Association have released a standard for using 3.5mm jacks to MIDI. There you go, never mind, it's just the way it goes. So how does it sound? Let's get straight in there and listen to the oscillators. So let's start with triangle wave, which is actually more like a shark tooth. I don't know if that's maybe Eric's Moog influence there. Tracking seems good. And you see that fundamental down there is really low, very nice. So moving through, we're going to go into saw. Square, and into pulse width, which actually sounds pretty nice. Now you'd sort of think, oh, I want to modulate that, that'd be great, but from the front panel this is not possible. So that's when we get into the notion of the editor. And we can access it via CCs, but this is the sort of stuff that you really want to see from the front panel, but that's the sort of limitation of the space they've given themselves to work in. But if I come to the editor here, this is running on the Mac, you can see that I've got the ability, these are the knobs that are replicated on the front panel. So we've got the wave shape, the tune, well, the wave shape and the tune, I suppose, and the level, which is somewhere else. But then we've got the LFO depth, which can either dial into the pulse width or the shape. So we can modulate, look, we're modulating the actual shape of the wave. And I can, as I move it through, well, I like that stuff. I mean, that reminds me of those old, the oscillators. I can't remember what it was on. It was on Poly KB, I think, had these really nice continually variable. And you've got this quite nice sort of effect that you get from modulating those wave shapes. But as I say, you can't get it from the front panel. You can store this if you make it with the editor or with CC controls, you can access them. So if we just bring up the second oscillator here, you press and hold the oscillator patch pad and it flashes, that means now that these become the levels for these. So bring the second oscillator out. Actually, before I do that, I've also got white noise, which is handy. So if we bring up both oscillators, press again. The tuning knob's quite handy. We've got plus and minus 12 semitones, but they've done this thing whereby if you're in the middle, you just get detune up to 100 cents, and then it goes into semitones. Just a nice bit of design work that sort of uses the limitations of the knob, but gives you sort of dual functionality, so you get coarse and fine on the same knob. No oscillator sync though on this, which is a bit of a shame really, because that's such a sort of strong sound in terms of analog synthesis. And when you've got two analog VCOs or DCOs, I guess they would be, because they're CC controlled by MIDI, so there must be digital control of them. It would have been nice to have that, but we haven't got oscillator sync, I'm afraid. Before we get onto the filter, we should mention these little performance buttons across here as well, which are sort of, they're like momentary modulation routing. So up and down pitch bend, vibrato, which is based on the LFO speed, wah, which is filter modulation based on the LFO speed, and tremolo, which is amplitude modulation. There's also a hold button. So kind of handy for perhaps, you know, if you want to quickly whack in a bit of modulation and you haven't got a spare hand to route it elsewhere. So we get onto the filter. As is traditional, we'll just take a single sawtooth into the filter. Add a bit of resonance. 50%. And as you can hear right away, we don't lose the bottom end, which is the advantage of it not being a ladder filter. And so we get a nice rounded, as we bring some more in. Get some lovely harmonics in there, bring it up to full. And the other thing that we've got here is the ability to drive the filter, which is again an analog circuit, and it's a custom design. That's all I know, because that's what Eric said it was. So if we just bring the drive up, get that kind of nice burn into it. I mean, it's perhaps not as extreme as you get on some analog filters. It'd be nice to maybe see another kind of couple of extra bits just so it could really get uncontrollable, but it's actually got quite a pleasant feel to it. One thing I did notice though, the filter is not self-resonant, so you can't play the filter. It doesn't work that way. I guess that's a disadvantage of the two-pole. Some two-poles at least can't do that. Some can, but this one can't. Right, so let's see if we can demonstrate a bunch more features at the same time. We haven't looked at the modes of the filter yet, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to run the sequence. I also demonstrate the envelope. That's about as fast as you can get on the filter. Let's go up to high pass filter mode, take the drive down, take the resonance right up. Listen to those harmonics. If I stop that, massive high pass filter harmonics, and then we haven't even brought in the drive yet, so wait a minute, this gets really huge. Let's put a bit of delay in the mix as well. So press the mix button, and this is where you start to sort of see the shortcomings of the interface really, because you've got these up and down arrows, which yeah, you can kind of press and hold, but it really feels like I should be turning this knob because it's next to the parameter, and every time I do I change the cutoff, which is, so let's, right, nice. Let's go into bandpass mode, which again, when you bring that, Get those nice... I'm not going to use the word sing-song harmonics. Oh, I did. Bring the drive in. And I've also got the mod wheel affecting the cutoff, which I've dialed in via the editor. Also the wah amount rather, which is filter mod, and the LFO rate at the same time. So when I do this, let's play the tune. Take it down to low filter mode again. You can hear a bit more about what the how fast the filter envelope is. That's no attack, and that's it. Stop that. So it does bring out a couple of limitations. Envelopes not massively snappy. I mean, you know, playing around with the amount of drive and distortion, the amount of depth, you can sort of simulate higher speed. It'd be nice to see one of them or two of them looping because we've got limited amount of LFO. So if we could loop one of them, that would have been great. The other thing that I found, the LFO doesn't go all that high up into audio rate. That is not massively high, but you know, high enough, I guess. And then you can also sync it to the incoming clock as well. We'll now take a look at the sequencer, because I think the sequencer, I was using a little bit there, because the other thing that's really cool about the sequencer is you can record all the parameters. And when I say all, I mean up to 20 parameters you can record per step. So it gives you quite a lot of extra flexibility. Okay, so I've got a little sequence running here. And now if I go into record as well, I can actually start to record parameters. So I've just brought in the level of oscillator 2 on those last 3 notes. One thing you will notice though is when you actually have gone round once and it's recorded, it drops out of record, which is kind of a bit of a drag. Because if, for instance, I was doing, so I'll just, if I was doing, say, the mix of the delay, and let's go into record here. What just happened there is basically it dropped out of record and I was still tweaking, and then it went into preset mode and I changed presets and lost all the stuff I'd just done. That's a little gotcha there, and it's just a sort of UI anomaly, I think. I can't say it's like massively serious, but it's quite annoying. So anyway, back to the sequence. Let's go to record. So what I'm going to do now, I think I've got it here. I'm going to change this step. So I go into record, I move along to the steps, go to that, and I'm going to turn down the oscillators and turn up the noise. So now I should. Now what I'll need to do is also open up the filter, because I've got it shut at that point. So I'm going to go there, and this is in step mode. I'm opening the filter up to full, and I think I'll open it up to full for the next step as well. So let's see how that happens. So you can see I could kind of create rhythmic things. I mean, there are 20 lanes of this, so we could actually go kind of pretty crazy. Obviously only 16 steps here, and that's the one thing that you immediately start going, oh, it's a shame there aren't maybe 32 steps, because obviously a 2-bar cycle just gives you a little bit more variation. So if we go to this preset here, you can see the sequence is running, but there's no sounds coming off. But if I now play a note, what I've actually got going on here is oscillator 2 sequencing the pitch. So I'm modulating the detune amount via the sequencer. So if I now bring up that one, I've got the 2 oscillators, I'm modulating the pitch of oscillator 1 differently to modulator 2. Let's drop a bit of filter mod in there. Maybe we can sync the LFO. So I'm only really starting to scratch the surface here, but I know there are other synths that do this. We've got the Volcas and we've got the Minilog, but they've got limited amounts of modulation lanes. This has 20. Think about that, that's 20 modulation routings per step times 16. That makes it quite a powerful synthesizer in that respect, and does make up for some of the other shortcomings. And all of these, there's a new firmware that's just come out that allows you to record those from external MIDI CCs as well, so you can access some of those other parameters that are not on the front panel. So it turns into quite a modulation beast when you think of it those terms. A couple other things that came up while I was doing this. The delay is a bit polite. There's no control over the feedback. It would have been nice to be able to really wrench that out and kind of change the amount of feedback and get it to kind of really regurgitate and regenerate. You can't do that, so that's a little bit of a limitation as well. Quick mention about those presets. On board there are 100 slots. The first 20 of those are factory only, so you can't store over them. 21 and up, you can fill your boots and store in those. And then obviously if you hook them up with the librarian, with the patch editor, you can save those banks and those individual patches to disk on your computer and back them up and then bring them in and out as you see fit. So the IK Multimedia Uno Synth is 199 UK pounds. Other currencies will scroll below. Yes, it's more expensive than the Volcas, but I think it sounds quite a lot better than the Volcos. And with all of those additional modulation possibilities, and of course the storage, which does set it apart from maybe its nearest competitor for, I guess you get an Arturia microboot, which is only really one oscillator, but you get knob per function. It's more sort of traditional analog synth. You know, that patch storage makes a lot of difference to a lot of people. You know, this does actually sound pretty good, and having it be repeatable and something that you could keep in maybe a compact live setup, it's worth checking out because it does sound pretty good. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.